Yes.
Truck went out, Schultz has got a transmission.
So no word from politics?
On the truck, yes.
I think he's in Ordinance. Yeah, so no, he's on the house, but so.
Who was that?
Well, we don't have room for me. This is because he had to sit. Oh,
That's not the timeout that's. If that was the case, you or I would be over there.
we all three would be up there.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this evening's meeting of Planning and Zoning to order. I would like to start the evening out by welcoming Emily Kirshner to the board. This is her first meeting, so congratulations and thank you for joining us. We look forward to a lot of meetings with you, so thank you very much. Polly Rickard is also new, and she might join us later. If she does come in, we'll join and introduce her too. So we'll start with a roll call, please.
Yes, ma'am. Steve Thomas.
Here.
Tim Dooley.
Here.
Jill Tabor. Jeff Lawrence. Daryl Whitworth.
Here.
Jim Giroux.
Here.
Janice Menking.
Here.
Emily Kirshner. Here. Polly Rickard.
All right, thank you. We're going to go to item number 4 right now, which is public comments. This is a time when the Texas Open Public Meetings Act permits a member of the public to make comments on items that are on the agenda or other items. Is there anyone here who wants to make any comments tonight?
Is that what I signed up for?
No, no, if you've signed up for something that's on the agenda, you can make comments at that time. Did you have any written comments, or is there anyone online?
No, ma'am. Aside from what's been provided to you physically as part of the agenda items.
All right, thank you. All right, then we're going to go on to our public hearings. We have 2 of them tonight. We're going to start with public hearing 5A, request Z2113 by Steve and Marcia Mengel to consider a conditional use permit per section 3.510 to construct a first floor bed and breakfast unit in the historic shopping district overlay on property located at 211 West Austin.
I move we go out of regular session into public hearing.
I have a motion by Tim, I have a second by Daryl. Any discussion?
I have to excuse myself.
Okay, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? And you'll notice that Steve Thomas has stepped down. And Polly has come. Welcome, Polly. Welcome back. Welcome back to the commission. All right. Is there someone here who's going to make the presentation for this? All right, come on up.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brandon Weinheimer. I'm with SKT Architects. I also have with me this evening the owner of the property we're discussing this evening, Steve Mengel, in the back here. Steve and Marcia purchased this property primarily because of its location. It's in the central business district, which makes it ideal for a short-term rental facility of this scope. And it's also a block away from Main Street, so their guests would be close to many of the shops, galleries, and restaurants that Fredericksburg has to offer in the downtown area. There is currently, sorry, Shelby, is there another site plan? 2 site plans up tonight.
Wrong item.
There we go. We can zoom in just a bit. Here we go. Thank you. So there currently exists a residence on the property built around 1970. It's in relatively poor condition, and so the owners are electing to remove this structure and construct the development you see on the screen. There would be 8 individual cottages surrounding a central courtyard. Central courtyard is going to be very open and be a gathering space for guests and a place of relaxation. And the front building that's closest to Austin Street here is going to be a commercial kitchen and the check-in office for guests if they choose to check in person. On the back side of the building is a covered porch facing the courtyard, just a protected covering for guests to use. And in the back of the property, right here, is the manager's quarters. The managers, being the owners of the property, Steve and Marcia, will be living in this building and will be managing the day-to-day operations and addressing any concerns guests or neighbors may have during the operation of the facility. I do want to state too that the cottages, they're relatively small, about 400 square feet. They're 1 bedroom, 1 bed, 1 bath, so 2 guests max per cottage. And then behind the manager's quarters, we have the parking for the managers as well as the guests. One parking space per cottage and 2 for the managers. That is, the parking is accessed by a private alley, which goes out to Orange Street. So the alley is shared by multiple property owners in that area. I do want to note that the overall concept was recently approved by the Historic Review Board, except for the manager's quarters design. We haven't submitted a design for that yet, but we will this month. But the overall site concept, as well as the look of everything from Austin, has been approved. So I will be happy to answer any questions you may have after the public hearing is closed. Thank you.
Sorry, turn this back on. We have one request here for public comment. Mike Haley, would you like to come up and speak at this time?
Good evening. I'm Mike Haley, my wife Lindy behind us. We live at the property right next door to this at 209 West Austin. This house has been in the family 150 years. It's my wife's family home, been in the family forever. Highest rating of historical value. Our concerns are like pretty much like what you hear about all the short-term rentals, the noise level. Because of the size of this 8 units, short-term rental, we're concerned that it will certainly attract large party groups for weddings, bachelorette parties. We already have noise surrounding us. It's just unbelievable. We're just kind of boxed in. And we really have a big concern about the noise. Of course, the trash that's generated, parking, traffic problems, safety. We don't know who's coming in. We have grandchildren. You don't do a background check when you rent a hotel room, so we have no clue. Flooding. We have recently, and for years actually, flooding problem coming from the back properties, and we're really concerned about what they're going to do when they start grading and the construction. We've been in touch with the city, of course, the Historical Review Board, and just recently with the State Historical Commission. We've got some feedback, but we're still working on it. The City Historic Review Board concerned about preservation of the historic sites and homes in Fredericksburg. This to me is just going way out for this little bitty part of Fredericksburg for the history. We just feel like it's against being the preservation. Used to be against the law to disturb the peace. we feel like we're having our peace disturbed. We definitely protest it. That's about all I can say. Things are going to happen, progress is going to happen, but that home has been there 150 years, way before these businesses that are coming in, these short-term rentals that are coming in. I just recently saw that there's going to be someone who's going to be overseeing it. Maybe they could start now. Maybe start with this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Is there anyone else here who would like to make any comments on this one?
I move we go out of public hearing back into regular session.
I'll second that.
All right, a motion and a second. Do I have any other discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, then we're going to go to action item number 6A, discussion, consideration, and recommendation regarding request Z2113. Jason, you have comments on this one?
Yes, ma'am. Just a quick overview. Everything is in my packet, so I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have specifically on the site. They do meet all of the requirements in the zoning code to allow the short-term rental. What we're truly here tonight for on a CUP is because this is in the historic shopping overlay district. The thought process behind that district is that these areas be reserved for commercial uses, given that at least on the first floor. So to kind of activate the pedestrian activity. If you look at the map, there's not a lot of commercial in that side of Austin. They have, I believe there's across the street from the gentleman's house, there are some commercial areas, mostly banks. So we don't know that we see this as a high intense walkability for general commercial. And given the CBD zoning, some of the other uses that would be allowed in there would be much more intense than what the short-term rental would do. Things like nightclubs and bars could also be in that area. So given its consideration, its proximity, staff does support this requested change or the requested CUP. I would like to note that HRB did approve the design guidelines. There were several changes made to the property as far as building locations to kind of help protect the historic homes next door. So they have looked at that and approved that as well. As far as the drainage concerns, that'll be something that we address through the civil construction plans. When those come in for permitting, that's when the engineers will look at that to make sure there's no negative impact on adjacent properties. As part of that review, their applicant is not required to improve any drainage, but they must maintain the existing, so they could not increase the runoff that you're receiving. So.
All right, thank you, Jason. Anyone have any comments or questions?
I have one, at least one. Is there going to be any access to the property from Austin Street?
There is pedestrian access from Austin Street. There are a few sidewalks that lead up to the building, one to the check-in office and then another to the gate that leads into the courtyard. There are a few parallel parking spaces along the front, and so,
Do you anticipate that being striped for parking to encourage it?
Front part, no, at this time I don't. There was some conversation in the beginning about utilizing those spaces, but we don't allow existing on-street spaces to be utilized for off-street parking purposes. Engineering department is looking at a plan in this whole area that may address sidewalks, drainage, and some improvements to that pedestrian area. So they may stripe some others in there, depending on the right-of-way. They could be angled, but most likely they would stay parallel at this time.
That street would probably have to be parallel for sure.
This property currently has a drive on Austin.
there is a driveway that enters off of Austin Street, so that one would be removed, yes.
Okay, so the only
So all the
access
access,
is gonna be off Orange
vehicular
behind.
access is just from the back.
Yes, and just as far as access goes, City Fire Marshal did review this. There is adequate space in that alley for them to get a fire apparatus down there. At that point, they meet hose lay to the back portions of the building. If there was fire at the front, then obviously the firefighters would tackle that blaze from the front portion.
Another comment. While I understand the adjacent property owner's concerns, the thing that gives me some cause for at least letting you know that this property, apparently according to the applicant, says that the owners will live on site. And I have a pretty good idea that these owners will probably take care of the noise as best they can. And they will probably have restricted occupancy within 2 units. I mean, maybe they could get it full with a bridal party, but I've got to believe that the owners will take care of most things that other property owners that are not here don't address, and I think these people will. Thank you.
I would like to remind the commission that this is a conditional use permit. If there are concerns you have with the operation or the layout, you can place certain conditions on the operation of that. In this part, I don't believe there's any dance areas or halls or anything like that, but if there were something like that, you could place a condition on it saying, you know, that must be shut down by 10 or 11 or something like that. So just a reminder that if there is a condition or a concern you have the opportunity to address this through the CUP.
Is there a plan to fence it?
Screening is required because they're adjacent to that residential land use, yes. And I believe y'all are doing a stone fence, is that correct? Or
There is a masonry wall along the front, and then we have some screening in between each cabin or cottage along the sides.
What about screening between you and the adjacent properties?
Yeah, that's, I don't have my laser pointer, but in between each cottage, there is a small strip of fence in between each of those cottages along those property lines on the east and west.
So the cottages don't have windows, doors in the back?
They do not. No windows or doors facing the property lines.
That's pretty
And that's a fire issue as well.
Okay, and what outdoor amenities are being provided on the property and where are they located?
It's primarily just the central courtyard that you see, that open space there. Yeah, it's a mixture of materials, gravel, there's some stone, flat work, raised planters. There's going to be a covered porch on the back side of that front building there. Just a covered space, gathering.
Hot tubs or fire pits?
No hot tubs. Fire pits, we haven't talked about that, no. A fountain in the middle of the courtyard, right, no spa or pool or anything like that, so.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments?
Brandon, I'm curious what the landscaping, can you talk more about landscaping? I noticed that at least 4 trees are being removed. So what are you adding?
Well, the trees that you see there are not identified as to what species they are, but we're proposing to cover trees throughout. I mean, we want generous amounts of shade. The owners want a tree in between each cottage to provide shade for like a small seating area in between each cottage. And then anywhere where you see landscaping noted is where there are going to be planter beds. So we haven't provided a landscape plan yet. That will come with the building permit documents, and the owners are going to be selecting the landscaping for that.
And Emily, for your reference, we do have landscaping requirements in our zoning code that are very detailed, so that does get done at part of the building permit section, so.
That is a very strong aspect of the design that the owners want to see through is landscaping. They want it to have a very lush feel throughout the space, throughout the property.
Brandon, if my old eyes are reading this correct, you only have a 6-foot fence along the edge, the privacy fence along the exterior?
6-foot privacy wall along the front, and then 6-foot screening, yes, on those wooden fences that are in between each cottage, yes.
Jason, are we allowed to recommend or require an 8-foot on that if we chose to provide some additional privacy to the adjacent landowner?
Yes, sir, that would be within your authority. The maximum is 8 foot allowed by the zoning code. You could also require that to be done on the entirety of the property and not just between the buildings. Obviously, you probably want to get the owner feedback. Something like that wouldn't be enough to I don't think it would be enough to trigger an HRB issue, but that may be something, if you do make that type of recommendation, that you stylize it with pending HRB approval on the fence or something like that. Just, 6 to 8 is kind of a difference as far as aesthetic goes, so I don't know how that board would view that.
Yes, but on my tippy toes, I can look over a 6-foot, I can't look over an 8-foot.
Yes. I need a ladder for either, so.
As far as providing a continuous fence along the east side, the neighbor does have some screening that is continuous along their property line. Space is very tight in between the cottages and the property line as we have it now. So adding a fence would decrease that even more. And so that's why we're proposing these small screenings right in line with the cottage walls. So again, there should be no reason for guests to go in this small narrow strip between these screenings and the property line. It's kind of a utilitarian space.
The screening between the cottages, how tall is that currently?
6 foot. It will be 6 foot.
I would recommend that we move to increase that height at a minimum. It's about noise. I mean, noise travels at night. And the more buffer you can put between that and the residential neighbor at a higher height, that's going to be better. I have a short-term rental in a home.
Sure.
I've got an 8-footer solid wood fence, and it does a great job of blocking that noise from passing through onto the residential property. So I'd recommend a higher screening at a minimum.
Are you willing to put that in the form of a motion?
Yes?
Jason, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
The HRB that might trigger this, is that something that can be administratively approved by the chairman as opposed to calling the full group back into another meeting?
I think it could. Generally, you can make some minor tweaks. I think I'll leave that to Anna's determination. She's the historical expert as far as architect goes. But I think if there is a concern with sound and you want to go to 8, I think it would be better that we at least take that back to HRB. I don't know their timeline. If
Full blown or just admin?
That would be Anna's determination. If she has some concerns on it, she can send that to HRB, and then if they approve that, then they would make that change. If she's comfortable with it, again, I don't think it affects the overall architecture of the building. So,
Won't
but
even be
again,
visible except inside the courtyard.
correct.
And it's only going to be on that one side, as I understand. Is that correct?
Both sides.
I'm actually less concerned about the side towards Orange because all of those properties are already commercial.
Yeah.
But from an aesthetic standpoint and for the protection of your guests' privacy from the commercial properties that are to the west, you'd probably want to go 8 foot anyway because you're going to have a restaurant on that corner.
Right.
That retail spot can be flipped into a restaurant at a moment's notice. So you've got more issues of noise coming onto your property from the west that you also need to consider.
Okay.
So you want a motion to approve? Is that what you're asking for?
Comment on the fence issue?
Yeah. From our perspective, if the HRB, the city allows us 8 foot, absolutely no problem. We would prefer that. If our neighbors don't object to that, that would, I think, would be good for everybody. But wasn't sure what the HRB and the city allows us to do, so, but we're more than willing to do that.
And 8 is allowed by code. There would be no special authorization. It really would just, I don't think HRB will have a complaint on that, but I would like to run that through Anna and get her thoughts before we send out. That may be something that she could administratively approve.
I would hope so.
All right. Anybody got anything else?
Ready for a motion? You go ahead.
I move that we approve item number Z-2113 as a CUP with the edit to the proposed design that all privacy fencing be moved to an 8-foot height rather than a 6 foot as noted in the design guidelines.
And just for clarification, if HRB does deny that, would you still have this, is this an optional approval or recommendation, or would it be denial of the project based on the 2-foot height on the fence?
No. I think a recommendation.
Staff would recommend a recommendation as well.
Yeah, well, okay, I'm good with that. I don't want them to stop the entire project over that, but I would like to see the adjacent property owners have at least 2 foot more privacy and control on that stuff.
So your motion is raise it to 8 foot subject to HRB approval. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yes, thank you for paraphrasing me.
And I'll second that motion.
Thank you.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Do I have any other discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed?
Right. Excuse me, if I may, for clarity for the minutes, this does not affect the front wall that will also serve as privacy
Good point.
fencing, right? It's only the exterior on the east and west side, correct?
Yeah, that's my envision. The
Because that
exterior.
front wall's gonna be code restricted anyway with height.
It's on the corner.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Don't want to check.
Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is public hearing 5B, request Z2114 by Wes and Tammy Pack to consider a conditional use permit per section 3.510 to construct a first floor bed and breakfast unit in the historic shopping district overlay on property located at 514 West San Antonio. I will entertain a motion to open that public hearing.
So moved.
Motion by Tim,
Second.
second by Jim. Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay.
Mr. Spraggins.
Steve, are you coming back for this one? No?
SKT's the architect.
Oh, okay. Who's presenting this one? Oh, you're here. Come on up. I didn't realize it was, Steve's just gonna sleep back there all
Randy,
day.
you want to get paid, don't you?
Yeah, good evening, everybody.
Oh, you sleeping back
Man, you're
there?
really making me feel old. You guys are taking over. Well, and Brandon's an amazing architect, so I'm still here for a couple of years. Hope you all are doing well. My name is Randy Staling. I'm with SKT Architects. I'm here representing this project for the owners, Wes and Tammy Pack. Wes and Tammy unfortunately could not be here due to very important family reasons, but I'll give it a good try to be able to answer all your questions. Hopefully we can work through this. To begin with, I appreciate working with staff on this application, and we did receive some comments from them within the last several days, and we appreciate the opportunity to work with them, and hopefully we've been able to address some of their concerns, which I'm sure would have been some of yours also. And those largely dealt with the parking and with the location of the spas, which there are 3 of, one for each of these short-term rentals, and how these short-term rentals were situated on the site. But I think that the plan that is up on the screen, you'll notice is different probably than the one is in your packet. So I'm going to address my presentation to the one that's up on the screen because it is the one that we've revised, and our clients, Tammy and Wes, would be pleased to submit and would hope you all would be willing to approve. So very briefly, looking at the site at the front up here on San Antonio Street is the existing residence. It has 2 short-term rentals in it. Behind that, there are a couple of improvements which the owners have made very recently, and they'd very much like to keep, along with the addition of these 3 additional short-term rentals towards the back of the property. If you're familiar with that site, you'll know that it's a beautiful piece of property. I think personally, largely from the fact that there are 5 very large trees back here, and we're proposing to keep all of those trees. The only ones we're suggesting to remove are 3 small trees that are literally on the back fence line back here. But from a standpoint of basic logic of where to position things, it seemed to us that it was logical to put these short-term rentals back in this beautiful shaded area back here and not put them towards the front and try to force parking in the back. This parking area for the most part pretty much already exists anyway. One of the concerns that staff had with the original proposal was that we were showing 3 of the 5 spaces that we're required to have lined up right along this west property line. I appreciate and believe that staff's recommendation is a better suggestion, and that's what we're showing here, is to only stack 2 parallel spaces here and put the other remaining 3 spaces up here on this end of the parking area, utilizing the space along the west property line for our van accessible 8-foot wide unloading area, which seems to make logical sense with this arrangement of these parallel spaces here. The existing driveway along San Antonio Street is probably only 2/3, maybe 3/4 the width of what's there. What we're proposing to do is to widen that to 20 feet to allow a fire truck to get in here and be able to get to these back areas right here. It is of a distance that is acceptable, I believe, to the fire marshal's requirements that they not have to come in with the truck and turn around. They can merely pull in and back out. So that takes care of that arrangement. Addressing the noise level, which obviously is a big topic and was even on the previous application, is the location of the spas. And as staff mentioned in their comments here, Historic Review Board had the same concerns. But I believe that we could get a long way to addressing those concerns by, as staff suggested in this application, to simply rotate these short-term rentals so that we're still able to keep all the trees. They still stay essentially in the same place as they were in the original application, but we rotate them such that you'll notice that these structures are in an L shape and the spas are in one corner of what would make a square. By doing this, we would orientate the 2 short-term rentals in the back such that the spas still exist, but they're buffered at the east and the west by the structures themselves. They are exposed to the north, but that is CBD, or commercial property up here, so we think that this goes a long way to mitigate the noise towards the east and the west. The one towards the front, it would just do the same arrangement as the one here in the northwest corner. Same thing, orientate the spa towards the center of the property. Even in the original application, which I apologize was not very clear, and I was able to clarify that with Jason, and I'd like to do it now, is that even in our original application, we did not note this, but this line that's going around the exterior spa area was intended to be a 6-foot solid privacy fence to provide privacy to each one of those short-term rentals. We still intend to do that. The existing fence line, which I'm sure you would have questions about, I don't know what to tell you other than it's a mix match of a lot of different things. There's some 6-foot fences with vines growing over them completely, to some wire fencing, to a combination of the back fence back here is in very poor condition and it would be completely redone. I think logically where these short-term rentals have found themselves right now, and I apologize, we haven't been able to refine this much more than address the location and placement of them, but I think logically, these 2 back here, we would probably like to propose that these privacy fences actually become at minimum at this back area part of the actual fence along the property line. There's no need to have a privacy fence here and immediately 2 feet over and have the fence. So I think we'd all logically assume that's what we would propose probably when we bring the final plans for permitting. So I suspect that these 2 back here at minimum would have privacy fence surrounding those right there. The board can certainly make more recommendations on fencing, which I'm happy to discuss and entertain if more fencing needs to be done on these sides. But at minimum, I think logically that's what would be done back here. And at minimum, we would continue to keep that same privacy fencing around that area. These are small units. They would only have 2 occupants to each unit. Certainly that doesn't negate the possibility of there being a group that comes there. We know that. So we're hopeful that some of these things that we've worked with staff on over the last 2 days would help move towards addressing their concerns and yours as well. Let me say one other thing about parking, which I appreciate that staff brought up. was what about the possibility of trying to do some head-in parking here to provide a backup area and a pull-out? We already approached that topic in detail with our clients. They made it clear to us that they just made these improvements, which they spent a good deal of money on, and they would really like not to have to remove those. Certainly, any parking arrangement is probably not 100% ideal, but I think that this works for the situation. It is a good balance for everything concerned. So, thank you very much. Do you have any questions?
We'll take public comments and then we'll let you know later if we have some. Thanks. All right, I have two people who've signed up for public comments. Greg Catterley.
You need a ladder for a fence. I need one for a podium. Do you have an extra stand here? I think I can reach it. Good evening. My name is Greg Catterley, and I live at 611 West San Antonio. My wife lives there with me too, or maybe I live with her. We've resided there for 37 years, and we're one block west. We're one block west of the Project Z-2114 at 514 West San Antonio. And I do realize that that's R2 and we are R1, fortunately. We're on the other side of Bowie Street where the R1 starts. And I have sent written comments to y'all via Ms. Collier, and I hope you received those. I did want to touch on a couple other things here. And first of all, I'd like to address, and this may seem a little bit off the wall, but a comment, often said comment, that I think is frivolous. And the comment I hear is, but look how much you can sell your home for, Greg. I didn't buy that place to sell my home to see how much money I can make. I bought it 37 years ago because that's where I wanted to raise my family, and I liked the neighborhood, and that's what it was at the time, a neighborhood. A number of years ago, I made a comment to a local, very successful real estate agent about how much money I was spending on my old house. And he corrected me, and from then on, I remembered that. He said, Greg, it's your home. It's not an investment. And I think that's what's happening to our neighborhoods. They're turning into investments. The planning and zoning is charged with recommending how the rules be carried out. You know, if we keep our neighborhoods as neighborhoods, not as a hot STR market, the value of the homes may not accelerate, but we do have our home and our neighborhood as we once thought it was. Now, I know you guys can say, well, Greg, we've done this before and we're going to have to do it again because we're concerned about litigation. But, you know, I'll be happy to pay additional city taxes if we have to defend it. At some point, we just have to quit turning the neighborhoods into businesses. Why can't we keep our neighborhoods just that way? You know, and the other thing with these projects is they're crowding the city lots in the historic district. I mean, there's just too much building. They're not the open lots anymore. And they're not subject to the, I can't think of the word, impervious structure which dumps more water into the streets and onto the lots. But it's happening. The more roofs you got, the more walks you got, the more water you got. I think the city council is going to have to address the water situation on South Bowie as witnessed in a 2-inch rain recently. And for those people that say, oh, but look how much the STRs bring in hotel motel taxes, and I understand that, but if we have to have less STRs and we can regain our neighborhoods, I feel like the hotel and motel industry will build more lodging. It's a law of supply and demand, and if there's a demand, the lodging will be there, but it'll be in the right places, in the zoned areas along the highways, the way the city wanted it originally. The FM 965, 290, Highway 16 North, and the other commercial areas of the community. And I would be so bold as to suggest that since the city will be considering new STR rules soon, and I'll finish up, I know I'm past my 3 minutes, that maybe the owners would want to consider withdrawing the request. I don't believe they're here, but to make the good neighborhoods of Fredericksburg just that, good neighborhoods, not business areas. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Greg. Rebecca Davis?
I'm just relieved to find out we only have 3 minutes. I did not come with a prepared speech. I'm here to speak on behalf of my sister, Mary Montgomery, who lives at 515 West San Antonio, corner of Bowie and West San Antonio. She bought that house in 1992, and it was a residential neighborhood at the time, and her home has always been a private residence. It is now surrounded by short-term rentals entirely. As far as the specific property that we're talking about, as well laid out as the plan is, there's congestion there. Everything seems to be a tight squeeze that will spill out onto the street. Recently in the area, when the last time my sister was here, she lives in Dallas and comes down here regularly. The bed and breakfast in the area, there were so many cars that looked like they were having a concert, actually. And her objection really in opposition to this particular development rose out of a discrepancy that she recently submitted a plan to put a bathroom into her guest house and to turn an existing structure already on her property into a small bedroom and bathroom because she has a growing family with grandchildren. And if y'all have ever seen my sister's house, it's one of the reasons why people really love the historic district, because there are homes like that people take care of with integrity. And believe me, it has taken a lot of time, effort, and a healthy expense to maintain it to the standard that it is. And please drive by it and you will see that for yourself. Anyway, the more people there, the more guests, the vacation mentality. Recently, the bed and breakfast residents or guests put a dead animal in her waste can outside. It died, started smelling, and it was just a nasty situation to have to deal with. So the more people that are guests in the area, they're not private residents, they're not looking to be here for any other thing but the weekend and, of course, enjoying themselves, and we like people to do that in Fredericksburg. The worse it gets. And her last comment to me was, when I spoke to her on the phone the other day, it's turning into a hotel district, not a historical district. So she hopes you will consider allowing our neighborhoods to come back to be what the people originally moved here for, the visitors and for the residents. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here who would like to make comments on this one?
I move we go out of public hearing back into regular session.
I'll second that motion.
All right, a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, then we'll go to action item number 6B, discussion, consideration, and recommendation regarding request Z2114. Jason, you have comments?
Yes, so I laid out the
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. I laid out the zoning requirements in my packet. They are meeting all of the requirements of R2 zoning. For a development of this size, for multifamily, they would be required at least a 16,000 square foot lot. They are showing at 17,400, so they're not in violation of any of those uses. Again, based on the current zoning, this property could be developed into a small multifamily complex. So given its location, given the changes to the parking and the layout, especially the screening and location of those spa areas to try and help the neighbor, staff can also support the CUP. Again, with any CUP, there are some conditions that you can place on that if you so choose to. So HRB had the same conditions as far as density goes, location of spas. Their code doesn't allow much to address that situation itself. They can kind of do separation and things like that, but ultimately they did recommend approval of that proposed site plan, and staff can support that as well.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, questions?
So is this for us, before us, a CUP approval or a preliminary plat approval? Because it says.
CUP, I'm sorry, did I have a typo in the PowerPoint or in the?
So then my question is, Randy mentioned some existing improvements behind the original structure. What are those improvements? Is that a swimming pool?
No, that is a fire pit. There's the circular ring. The building immediately adjacent to the fire pit is a small cabana. Then there is an existing porch and then another shed. I'm not sure the use or function of that shed. Can you? We talked about that, but I don't remember this time what that was.
From my observations, I think this is actually an historic structure, actually of the same period of the house. This is a relatively newer structure, not of the same date, but kind of the same style, vernacular of the house. This is an opened outdoor sitting area, pavilion, cabana area, thank you. And then this is an outdoor seating area with a fire pit in it.
Is that the old dog's nursery that backs up there?
That's right, it is. Yeah, so this is already, a very, very much commercial property here. And I believe there are short-term rentals actually on both sides of this property already.
I guess the east side of that, is that the Dodds approach? Yeah, that piece of property.
On this side?
Yes, or is there?
No, there's a home.
I believe there's a.
Yeah. We'll pull up the zoning map. So yes, there have been we did some research on this. So our map, Shelby's going to pull that up now. You'll see the green dots are existing short-term rentals. We did verify that the home next to or to the east of the proposed home has a short-term rental recent application, I believe May of this year is that when we looked. And then the two residential neighborhoods on the east side one of those was a new application for an STR also in May, and the other one had previously been a short-term rental, but we have not received a renewal application, so we don't know if they're operating at this time.
One behind.
Yes, sorry, the one above it, sorry, that's the one that
The ones facing Bowie were the ones I was going to ask about. Are either of those short-term rentals?
we believe of the two that are facing Bowie, we believe the northern one is.
Yes.
We know that it was permitted prior, but we don't have any.
Don't know its current use.
Yep.
It did change hands.
So my question's going to be about fencing from the adjacent properties. And I know this was already a short-term rental. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yeah.
It's been run as a short-term rental already.
Yes, so there's the existing home has 2 units available in it, so these are 3 additional
So
units.
they're adding 3 to what they've already got.
Eight people. 3 more in the back.
Are these new units 1 bedrooms? Or
Yes,
2
they are.
bedrooms?
The new
They're
units are
1
1
bedroom.
bedrooms, yes.
And they're going to be max occupancy of how many?
2
2?
each.
Yeah, because they're 800, well, technically they could be 4 by fire code, right? 200 per person?
200 per person, yes.
So on
Yeah,
our
but there's only
existing,
a sleeping area, obviously, larger than two.
I could see a situation where it was a couple and maybe a small child or something like
Yeah.
that,
but technically how many square feet is each unit here?
I believe 600.
Are they 600?
I believe right around 600.
Okay, 600, their technical occupancy can be 3 per fire code.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you've got 369, and then in the front, you're at 1,700 square feet, so you can have 5. Because you're not quite, no, you can have 6.
6.
You have 6, you can't have 7, but you have 6.
15.
So you get 15 total on this property. If you take your technical occupancy that you get from fire code.
Yes, and that is obviously the struggle we have with all short-term rentals as far as occupancy goes. It is difficult from a code enforcement standpoint. When you go by, you can count the number of vehicles. You could see, they could have the windows open, you could see 20 people inside that facility. You don't know who's actually sleeping there. That's one of the struggles that we have from a code enforcement issue. Again, this is a conditional use permit, so if there's some concerns you have with density and parking, you could require more parking than what is required by code. That is the beauty of a CUP. You can
Randy,
make
just
some changes.
correct me, you're only showing 4 spots with a handicap spot, right?
No, we're showing a total of 5, and the handicap can count as one of those 5.
So basically 1 for each.
Yes. Yeah, so we
Unit
meet,
Plus 2 for the front.
that's correct. So we have 5 units and we have 5 parking spaces.
And each of the 3 units in the back, technically, they're 1-bedroom units.
There absolutely are. I really don't see how you would get 3 adults in those units. And I don't even know technically how you'd get 2 adults and a child. I mean, by the time you get these short-term rentals want nice roomy bathrooms in them and a little living area, kitchenette. There's not much room there's not a big luxurious large sleeping area. It's pretty small.
So Jason, my other question is, with the CUP, can you restrict occupancy?
Yes, you can.
So
With
we
the-
can put it at what they say they want as their occupancy and then require that to be their max occupancy.
You could restrict occupancy, you could
Require
say
more parking?
only 2 units are allowed. You could say more parking would be required. There's some flexibility on the conditional use. Now, again, those would just be recommendations to council, and then council would have to vet those.
I mean, honestly, what made that last project more palatable to me was no hot tubs, because that's a big, giant, hot button issue in this town. And the second thing is it had a lot of parking, and I don't see either one. I mean, those elements are not here. I mean, they're not part of this, so.
Breakfast on West San Antonio, 1 block in the block west on Greg's side of the street. There were 7 cars there. I've seen as many as 8.
Unfortunately, again,
Panics on
that is the struggle that we have from a code enforcement. Again, Randy.
I certainly understand the concern,
2 people, 2
but
bedroom, but if that guest wants to sleep 8 in that, they will sleep 8 in that, whether the owner knows about that or not. So that's something that we struggle with. But from a plan code perspective, this does meet our minimum regulations.
I appreciate that, and I understand the concern, but we do meet the requirements that we're to meet. We have 5, and we have 5 parking spaces.
Now, I'm more concerned about allowing the operator, and I know the owners, and I know they wouldn't do it on their watch, but if they sold it to somebody else and that person has the ability to stuff more people in there, so they can get 15 people on that property technically under our current ordinance, correct?
Correct.
With 5 parking spots.
With 5 parking spots. I would prefer, since we are doing a CUP and we have the ability to cap occupancy, I would prefer us to put an occupancy cap on the property to match the parking spaces that they have.
Which would be basically 10 people.
10 people.
I have a question.
Sure.
When we are looking at approving these, do we take into consideration the saturation of the area? The fact that there's already a lot of STRs in the area? Or is it an individual thing when STRs, first off, when STRs are approved at the city, and then when we are looking at something like a conditional use permit for the area?
At this point, right now, there's no regulations that have us look at the the saturation or the density. From a planning perspective, we always have some concerns with that because that is an issue. It was mentioned earlier about the loss of neighborhoods. Again, I do focus on the existing zoning on this is R2, so we are theoretically talking about an apartment complex should someone buy these lots here. So again, from a planning perspective, I always look at the zoning versus the existing use because I understand what can legally be allowed. As far as the occupancy cap, my concern on the cap right now is the existing home did not have a CUP on it, so it's
by right.
It's by right existing right now. So even if we changed the rules, now the only other way to address the density or the concern with parking would be to say,
Remove one.
we want more parking, or you remove a unit, or unfortunately the cabana has to go away and you park them in. So those are kind of the options in front of you, but to limit, you would not be able to restrict the occupancy on the existing 2-unit STR.
Could I ask if restriction on occupants is something that's applied to other approvals?
I'm just testing what's available under a CUP.
I understand. I want to assure
To
the
limit the
board.
impact.
I appreciate that. And I want to assure the board that
Yeah.
our clients intend to plan well, build it very beautifully, and maintain it well. And they want to be a good neighbor. And I think just have the same opportunities that other short-term rental owners have.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I concur with your thought process, Polly.
Yeah.
We're listening to Mr. Lutz say on more than one time, they can't control it. We
Right.
require they put 2
I know.
people there, nobody's gonna look
No,
at it.
I don't, I'm just throwing out things that are possibilities for us to think about, not sure whether they're gonna work or not. My alternative thing is if there's potentially 15 people can be on here, we need parking to accommodate 15 people.
And Mr. Whitworth, I would like to say it is a struggle for us to enforce that. I wouldn't go too far as say we can't. But if we don't put a cap on there, I can tell you it makes it that much more difficult to enforce. So having a regulation, if we do go there and they admit that they have 8 guests and we don't have a cap, then no, I can't enforce it at that point. But if
Then what would be the ability of the city to control that? Say we cap it at 10 and they have 12 there, and they confess if they've had 12. What is your opportunity then to, what are you going to do? Remove the CUP from them?
we can actually revoke the STR permit. That is allowed by our current code. So if we have repeat offenders, if we find someone that is consistently thumbing their nose at city regulations or not working with code enforcement, then yes, we can escalate that and actually revoke their short-term rental permit at that time.
I mean, there is different treatment under CUP than by right.
Yes, ma'am.
So we have different options under a CUP situation that we don't have when it's a by right STR. So, just something to consider.
Sorry, I didn't have my microphone on, I apologize. I was querying Jason about the ability of the city to enforce that if they did indeed find that the people were in violation, the number of occupants that we put on the code or on the CUP.
If I may point out, currently the occupancy doesn't just go with the property as a whole, it goes by unit. So each unit would have to obtain their own permit. So if you're, as the commission, considering occupancy limits, when you make that motion, I would encourage you to keep that current process in mind. We couldn't issue an occupancy limit for the entire property necessarily per the STR permit. We would need to know what those occupancy limits are in the current configuration.
Right, so it would be, you could say, we want to limit to 2 of the new units versus saying 6 on the whole. That's how.
So the STR permits are per unit?
Yes, sir. So for example, this property would have 5 different STR permits.
Which is why it's fun to track for us.
So by the STR ordinance currently, each one of those units is only going to have an occupancy of 2 based on the square footage.
By the current ordinance, each of these newly constructed units would be able to have 3 occupants, because we referenced the 2015 International Fire Code, which calls out 1 person per 200 square feet of living space. So I'm assuming that the 604 square feet shown on the site plan is in fact living space. It wouldn't include porches and things like that. So based on that assumption, then they would be entitled to 3, an occupancy of 3.
And then I guess the only other question is, fencing. I know you said it's a hodgepodge. What is Wes and Tammy planning on doing to shield or to, between the occupant unit to the west of it? What's planned? I can't make it out from the small set of plans I have. Is that a fence?
Border fence, Randy.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Is that a border fence on the property line between the units? I mean, between the structures, between the lot and the next lot?
You're talking about this right here?
Correct.
Yet there is an existing fence there, as I said, varying different types of fences. So our original intent was to...
Screening is what I'm talking about, Randy. I know what you're talking about. That's a bunch of wire and a bunch of chicken. I've seen it.
Yeah, it's just...
Screening. Are we screening this?
Around the entire property with new screening, we hadn't proposed to. Our intent was to provide new privacy screening around each unit. And as I said, now that working with staff and suggesting that these units move to the back, at this point, the new fencing, I think, would logically go from here, back to here, at minimum. That could be whatever screening you want, but I don't think that screening and fencing would be objectionable to whatever the board wishes to suggest. I think a bigger issue for them might be limiting the number. I think logically that these units logically only sleep 2 people. On the other hand, to restrict it to only 2, I think could have those few times that there might be a couple with a child, and they're not going to put 3 adults in these things. That's just not logical. But I think those times where there may be a couple with a child or something, to put that limit on, I think might be objectionable to them. That no longer becomes available to someone like that.
What's our definition of occupant in our current STR ordinance? Is that an adult?
We don't define.
We don't define.
We don't define age.
Talk about cleaning up on the new one, right?
That is something, but then that gets into a whole nother host of legal issues, and so we don't know that we're going to do that. If you look at a hotel, they don't define those occupants. It's a person staying there. So basically, if you're
So a child would be an occupant.
if you go to a hotel,
By code, they would be, yes.
if you go to a hotel, anytime you register online, they ask you number of children, and they give you an age. And if some hotels it's 13 and up and you pay, and some it's 2 and up and you pay. I mean, so.
But they still count towards your occupancy.
They do still count towards your occupancy, because ultimately that is what this is about. This is life safety and getting people out of a fire. As far as limiting the occupancy, if I'm searching for a apartment or a STR or a hotel that sleeps 3, but I have my wife and 2 kids, then obviously I'm looking in the wrong location. So, yes, it may affect their number of tenants that may solicit their services, but I don't think it'll affect their overall operation.
So do y'all know what the occupancy license for STR for the 2 front units is right now? I may have mentioned that, but I forgot it.
It's based on the square footage, so without knowing what the way that unit is split is it's an upstairs and downstairs. So I can see the overall square footage of the entire building, but I don't know what the square footage is for each unit.
What's the total square footage? 1,700?
1,700, so they would be entitled to 12 occupants.
12 occupants?
Is that right?
No.
Okay,
2, 4,
right.
6, 8, 10.
Let me get my calculator.
Yeah, sorry, hang on.
8.
If we were good at math, we'd be engineers. 17, what was that?
Thank you for that. 1,700 divided by 2.
Yeah, 8.5.
Thank you.
And ultimately, another issue with the occupancy limits, they are hard to prove as far as if we're out and about at night and seeing that. But if there's a complaint from the neighbor and we go by during the day and we do an inspection, which we're allowed by right to do, and we go in and we see 4 beds, 2 bunk beds in there, then that's pretty easy, violation.
But it's fairly easy to match up what they advertise on their listings versus what their STR permit says their occupancy is.
Sometimes there's quirky little things in the listing, like ask about alternative sleeping methods. They don't say they'll give you another bed, but there's cots, there's air mattresses. I mean, we've seen bunk beds in a closet, so I'm not gonna say your applicants are doing that, but I mean, we've seen it all in this line, so.
All right.
It appears to me that we're trying to solve a problem that we really cannot solve in this particular case. As much as I hate some of this stuff going on, I don't think we're really in a position to make any changes. This is council's responsibility. We can make recommendations and we can field all of these requests, but until they change the ordinance and give us some good guidance on this stuff, the horse is out of the barn, folks, and there's not a whole lot we can do about it from our perspective on planning and zoning. We can tweak this, we can tweak that, but that ain't gonna solve the problem. My opinion.
So is there a motion in it?
Nope.
Is it something new?
Yeah. To answer Mr. Gooday's question, you can deny the conditional use permit. Or not recommend people.
I think my clients would ask why on that basis.
Yeah, we don't have grounds.
We have no good.
No grounds.
So
right.
let me float a proposal.
Okay.
But we approve with two restrictions to go to council, and that is one, screening,
8 foot,
8 foot.
8 foot screen.
We're allowed, because down the front, you can have to drop down to 4. And then the second one is 2 occupants per in the new units, maximum.
I second that.
Okay, have a motion by Jim and a second by Tim. Does everybody understand the motion? Any other discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you. May I ask a question with respect to the motion for the screening? Is that around the entire back of the property or just around each unit?
The whole entire property.
Entire
Around the property, okay, thank you.
Screen
Through
from the
screen, not
adjacent
yet.
landowners.
Got it. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. So those 2 public hearings will both go to city council. So those of y'all have another chance to speak at city council. That's in 2 weeks. When is that, Jason?
Those will go to the August,
Who's got a separate one?
no, not the Monday meeting. The 16th. August 16th, sir. Yes.
Right back here?
Same time, same place. 6 o'clock.
Let's come back. All right. All right, the next item we're going to come to is action item number 6C, request P2119 by Joshua Needham with Seco Ventures for preliminary plat of the proposed Seco subdivision for property located at the southwest corner of Friendship Lane and South Eagle Street. Are y'all ready to present?
Hello?
Hello.
Sorry, I'm gonna get rid of my gum. So we're here to present our preliminary plat. Our plan mirrors what we had shown you previously when we were coming through for our annexation agreement. 4 lots, 3 of which the plan is still to do garden style and single family for rent. And then we have separately platted our retail space and are actively seeking retailers for those spaces. Happy to take any questions you may have.
Crank that mic up towards your face, I'm good there. Greg's gone.
You don't need the...
Jason's not talking.
I have one question. How soon do you expect to break ground?
We finished our SD, so we're in the middle of DD with our architect. We needed to get some comments back from the city on our preliminary plat and have started our final plat and site development permit. We're expecting that to take around 4 to 6 weeks. So we plan to be back in this fall with our site development permit, final plat, with a hope that we can start in early 2022.
Thank you.
Jason, you have comments on this one?
Not much to add. The request is pretty straightforward. As Mr. Needham said, this is no change from what we've seen. We've reviewed the plat. There are some easements with the adjacent property owner to the west. They're placed on the plat. Those aren't set in stone until that agreement gets done, but they did provide the easement. I think the only thing to work out is some of the maintenance language that's there. We are going to require that just because of our spacing issues and cross-access. The only recommendation that staff has or condition or note to make on this is that some of the language and some of the plat notes may need to change depending on what happens with those easements and maintenance. So I think the motion should be to approve the preliminary plat in its layout and form, but just note that those plat notes would be subject to change possibly. I don't want to set those in stone on an approval and then we're kind of stuck with that if something should change with adjacent landowners. But from the plat perspective, the layout, we have no issues or concerns on that.
Can you tell us what plat note you had an objection to?
Not really an objection. There's a plat note on the general easement, page 1, addressing that mutual access easement where it actually calls out shared maintenance. That's not something this body can approve. So we don't want the thought, well, the plat note was approved, so it goes with the plat. I mean, that's a civil matter between you and the neighbor. Now that easement would be shown and it would just show a reference to the deed and document. The details would be in that recorded. And then I think the first page just calls out that plat, mutual access easement. I think it's the second page of the plat. There's a reference to that same easement that talks about that's where the maintenance is, or vice versa. I can't remember at the time, but we just don't want to set some of those plat notes. We just want to be clear that those may change and that this plat approval today is not an approval of all of those note language.
Well, we can go to, those changes can be made and then we can approve it on that final plat.
Yes, that's staff's thinking. Depending on what happens, there's some wastewater language notes. We just don't want to, block ourselves into, some language that may or may not change in the future. So ultimately, the preliminary plat layout, we have no issues with. Staff, the engineers have looked at the utilities, no issues with that. And ultimately, this final plat will be contingent on the construction documents getting approved, especially when we talk about the floodplain, the drainage, the wet detention and all of that.
So do we need to specifically defer approval of plat notes until final plat?
I would make that in the motion just so it's clear.
So it's clear.
Yes, ma'am.
So before Mr. Wilson shows up, I recommend we approve P2119 preliminary plat with the exceptions to the plat notes.
Second.
A motion and a second. Do I have any other discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
Is that sufficient language, Jason?
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, generally, those notes can change anyways. We just wanted
just
to
want
be
to be
clear,
clear.
just to make sure.
I turned my mic off.
Yeah, but everybody heard it.
All right, let's go to action item number 6D, request P2121 by Mark Sparrow on behalf of HK Fredericksburg LLC for a final plat on the Friendship Oaks subdivision, formerly known as the Heather Glen subdivision, located on the south side of Friendship Lane in the vicinity of South Creek Street. You ready, sir? All right.
Good evening, Chairman, members. My name is Mark Sparrow. I represent HK Fredericksburg LLC. What is in front of you is our preliminary final plat for the first phase of Friendship Oaks. It is consistent with the preliminary plat that was submitted and approved earlier this year, I believe in January. It includes an extension of Creek Street through a portion of the property. Also includes a park, which was required under the annexation agreement, and it will be a private park. Jason and I spoke earlier, so just to clarify that, as well as detention. So I'm here to answer any questions you have on this preliminary final plat.
Okay.
When do you expect to break ground? I'm gonna ask you
You didn't have to
every
talk
one
to
of them, so
Jason
you
yet.
might as well get used to it.
Well, if the builder was standing before you, which they're not, they would want to say as soon as possible. We are finalizing our construction drawings. We are working with the property to the east on drainage, and we just got their sewer stub out specifications, so we're finalizing our plans and hope to have those submitted, within the week. And then, depending on, staff review time, our goal would be to try to break ground as soon as the plans are approved. So I would say realistically, probably within the next 60 days.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Mark,
You're
were you
welcome.
able to address some of your cut and fill problems with the redesign of the reworking of this?
Yes.
Jason, do you have any comments?
Yeah, so just a quick add-on, staff recommends approval of this, but we do want to make a couple of conditions or modifications. So going through the parkland or the annexation agreement, we did notice they are paying 50% fees as part of that agreement because they are providing this track B. However, the plat itself, there's some language in the dedication of the roads. It actually mentions the park being dedicated to the city, so we are not accepting the park as part of this, so we need to amend that section. And then because of that, then we need to add a plat note stating that the park will be maintained park, the drainage and the detention tracks will be maintained by the homeowners association. We just want to make sure that the city doesn't accept these things via the plat. So we can make those corrections and then they can move forward on their final plat. And then the only other condition is that the construction plans are approved and the TIA is approved. And so if something comes out of that review that may change the layout, if it's a minor, it's a loss of a lot or a tweak of an angle here, that can be approved via staff level. If it was something that caused a full redesign or something like that, then it would come back. But so the only conditions are is change the plat notes, the dedication language, and that this meet the TIA and construction plan approvals.
Okay.
Am we ready for a motion?
A quick update on the TIA, just so you know where we stand on that. We've had conversations with Garrett. We have sent him exhibits back and forth, and I think where we're at now is, I think in principle, he's agreed. We just needed to make a change with respect to some left turn lanes on Friendship Lane. And I think once that exhibit's final, we'll incorporate that into our traffic impact study and resubmit it as final.
And just to piggyback on that, I did speak with Garrett on that. I'm aware of that situation. Those changes are minor. It's actually striping is the only thing that we're looking at. So it's not a design or mitigation or shoulders or stuff like that. It really is paint on the grounds.
Thank you, Jason.
Any other questions, comments? All right, now you can begin.
I make a motion, we approve P2121 with all that other stuff Jason said.
Me, sir.
You got all that stuff for the motion? All right, I have a motion by Jim. Do I have a second?
I'll second it, all that other stuff.
Yeah. A second by Daryl. Sorry, he beat you to it. Sorry, Jim.
He did.
Any other discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, get
Thank you
started.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, finally, you guys in the back. Huh?
One quick note.
Yes.
Steve, did you return for this item? You voted on this item, correct?
Yes, and he did for the last one, too.
And for the last one, let me make a note. Thank you.
All right, let's go to action item number 6E, requests SP 2110 by Tammy King for a site plan approval of a new VFW hall located at 710 South Washington.
Good evening, members. I'm Jim Bisson. I'm the post commander for the Fredericksburg Veterans of Foreign Wars post. We're here requesting site approval for a new post to be located at the same location where our current post is at. If you have any questions, I defer to Cass Phillips.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That's what he's being paid for, right?
It's called getting thrown under the bus, I think. Really, just a brief overview. The existing post, I think that the plan here is, first and foremost, there's going to be a good bit of fundraising necessary to make this happen. The primary stream of revenue the VFW has to do their programs is what that cantina generates, where it sits. So the idea is we are wanting to build the facility back behind that row of trees that divides the lot in half, and remove the old building once they're ready to get the new one up and running. So that's the scheme. I appreciate the help that Jason's given us as far as tweaking the site plan. To my knowledge, I believe that the fire requirements are met. We have a dedicated fire lane on the south side of the property. There's really no reason that the lane across the rear or the west side couldn't also be a fire lane. So reaching the property and reaching the building should not be an issue. Anyway, that's pretty much the overview. If you have any specific questions, to answer them.
All right, thanks. Okay. Jason?
Yeah, so the site plan approval tonight is also going to include a portion of our entry corridor guideline approval. So obviously, if you're familiar with those guidelines, you understand the requirements on that is for the building to be, or the parking to be located in the rear of the building. So if you look at the site plan, the proposed building does have their parking in the rear. However, they do wanted additional parking. In a perfect world, they would be able to demo the building and build a new one and meet those regulations. Unfortunately, this isn't a perfect world. We understand their situation. So they did provide some vegetative screening along those parking areas, even though it is up in the front. So staff can support this design. We will have no issues. It meets the parking. It does meet fire code. The only kind of items that would be housekeeping later date would be once they get their building design, then they would come back to just have the architecture reviewed for the entry corridor. Obviously, we're not there at that point. And then staff did have some conditions noted on there. TxDOT is going to have to approve their driveway approach. Also, as far as any utilities, if there's any new additional ones putting in. I think the last one is the sidewalk is required, so this is part of that plan on the sidewalk plan. But again, that'll be part of the TxDOT permitting process because that'll be in there right away. So I would just, staff would recommend approval of this with the conditions that we listed in our staff report.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
Yep. Jason, what about a time limit? If these people are trying to raise funds for this new building, are we going to get in a situation like the Turner Hall over there?
Well,
is there a time limit? That's the question.
Well, if I can address that, I don't believe it's in anyone's interest to begin construction until we have money in the bank.
Okay. But that,
correct me if I'm wrong.
I understand, Cass, but that begs the question, is there a time limit if from approval to must start the project?
To start. So 2 years, the site plans approvals are good for 2 years.
Okay.
So if they don't have it at that point, I believe, and I'll need to do some research, I think there's a way staff can extend that as long as we get those requests in writing. If not, we would have to bring it back at that point. However, since they have an application in, I don't know if regs change. We'd have to have some conversations on are they grandfathered on the existing regs versus the new. And now as far as when they start construction, so similar to Turner Hall, I agree, obviously, they are going to want to have all their funding because they're not going to want to have a building that's half, because ultimately,
Understand.
building it and getting rid of the old one is what's going to improve their property. And so the building code requires that building permits are good for up to 6 months as if there is no work being done. At that point, they go away. Now, they could leave it vacant for 6 months and come and turn one shovel of dirt and do something, and then it extends it again. So that we don't have a lot of protection over the building code. After that, if it's sat for so long, like Turner and some of these others, we'd have to have some conversations on how do we legally claw back from that.
Thank you. I'm not opposed to the project, but I just got to ask a question because we've got a situation in town where
It's a valid
you've got a couple of projects sitting around with red iron up and nothing else is happening.
Sure.
At least I'd like to know the
And
answer.
your intention is to continue to operate out of the existing building until the new building is constructed, so you're going to be on limited parking and a construction area around your existing building for a while?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Let General.
That's understandable. I wouldn't give up the revenue too quickly.
I think there's a perception of, how well, the parking was something we discussed at length. Visiting with the board, I'm not sure that they've ever had an event that they can remember that there was more than 120 people that showed up. So we're providing enough parking for 4 times that amount, but that's the ordinance, and so we're certainly going to meet it. So even the limited parking, as you say, is going to be probably more than adequate. I don't think we're going to eat up. And honestly, the parking area is probably the final thing to go in anyway, for the most part.
All right, thank you.
So where's the hot tubs going?
The fire pits. And the fire
pits.
The swimming pool.
But the parking here, that was something we discussed, and that's one of the issues that we may have to revisit later. The site plan is based contingent on the engineering and drainage and all of that, so that water's going to drain into TxDOT, so, we don't know what their capacity is or if they'll allow that. And ultimately, staff did support, I think, in order to keep it more green, they were talking about not doing that front parking and just going with what's in the back. That would have been a reduction under the code. We had to go through a variance process. But talking to them, instead of having this just kind of large open dirt space because that building was going to be there, we felt adding additional parking could give them more flexibility in the future to hold bigger events, to maybe turn it into some type of additional revenue stream, whether it's a small local wedding or birthday parties or things of that nature. So
They'll rent their parking spaces out on the weekend.
Yeah, man.
well, you do have authority over parking agreements, so if y'all want to entertain those options, then I'm sure they'll come
Put
forward.
wine buses over there.
This thing is spiraling.
Further, I think the intent for this facility is not to solely address the VFW programs. There are, Tammy King, the Veterans Officer of the county, put together a list of the veterans organizations and the activities that they do. I wish I'd have brought a copy of that, but it was 3 type pages list, and I think the idea is this might be a hub to provide a place for these things.
More of them, more to consolidate things.
Okay.
And I'd remind the board that this is going to be a fundraiser, so.
Yes, sir.
Stop by and have a beer.
Be several fundraisers.
Several fundraisers.
We do have a marketing or an awareness campaign starting to make people aware that we want to build a new post that's going to cost some money. So that has already started. Some small things are going on, but we really can't move forward until we get a site plan approval.
All right, quickly, guys.
Motion. I move we approve it as presented with the restrictions that staff are recommending.
That was line number 1, 2, 3, and 4.
All right, I have a motion by Tim. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Second by Jim. Any other discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion carries. Start that campaign. We're ready. Bill.
Get a beer.
All right, if Mr. Spraggins is awake, we're going to go to action item number 6F.
I'm working back here.
All right. Request.
Yeah, billable hours.
SP 2111 by Kevin Spraggins for site plan approval of the Vineyard Hills RV Resort located at 3255 South Highway 16.
Deja vu.
All right.
We approved this one once.
No, we looked at it. We didn't do a site
We had
plan.
annexation. That's where
Annexation.
you saw it. So, good evening, everyone. This is the site plan approval. That's all we're doing tonight. We're not asking for anything special. It's just a straight site. And as you said, Jim, we have gone through annexation and zoning. Annexation's all signed up. Everything's good to go on that end, and everything follows what was proposed before. So this is on Highway 16. It's across from the airport area. As you can see from the site plan that's up there, some of the items that we had to get approval to get where we are right now is both entrances have been approved by TxDOT. I didn't see the email in there, but we do have an email from TxDOT saying that both the driveways are good to go, subject to permitting, and but all the spacing's good, so we just have to engineer it and go through Austin and go through that process. We also did the corridor guidelines. We used to put that in the packet and get that approved all at the same time, and that's a little bit different now. But you do have the corridor guideline submittal and proposal through there, which will get reviewed during our building permit process, and we'll get through Anna. Jason. So we meet all the criteria. Staff is recommending approval with the conditions that we show, which just talks about TxDOT and corridor and civil and drainage and so on, which we're happy to comply with. Some of the items, one of the items as far as the offsite utilities is that we have met with TxDOT, and so the current plan is to put we have to force main this. Everything on that end of town has to be force main, just like we did with Cotton Gin and Mr. Gaddy's and everything that went down the road. So we force everything to Bose, and 16 is where everything gets forced in this area. That plan's not up, but I can show you that plan if you'd like to. And we've talked to TxDOT, and we're going to follow the same alignment that is currently there with the force mains in the right-of-way, water lines, and easement that is on property. So, here to answer any questions.
All right.
Ask for your approval.
Thank you.
So did you have pickleball incorporated, or are you taking that up now? Or?
You know, pickleball is a huge deal these days, especially with the RV boomers these days. They just love it.
You're gonna play that one of these. Is that
an amphitheater?
What's that?
Is that an amphitheater?
Yep, and pickle.
Yeah, they're looking at having the amphitheater there where, these are high-end coaches. These are your $1 million, these are your big coaches. And so, people that come in here, are looking to come to Fredericksburg, and there's a big lodge that's associated with it, with a great bar and adult pool. And, so this is a high-end facility, which you just don't have. I know we talked about it in the annexation. You just don't have that here. It's just skipped.
Yeah.
There's some around Lake Travis. We've worked on one there. And there's, you could say Buckhorn to a certain extent, but this is a high-end facility. And so they are having the different venues there. So that's part of the plan. And that was part of the corridor guidelines as far as making sure that whether you could see it or not, and how it's going to be shielded and so on.
Now, this property is immediately adjacent to the aggregate yard that the county has.
It is.
Right across the street from the entrance of our beautiful Lady Bird Johnson Park, correct?
Yes.
No, it's other.
Well, it's not, I say it's across from the park. It's not across from the entrance. The entrance is further.
Across from Bill Ham's property is, that's actually.
I know where this property is, but
Okay.
does this property actually abut up against the county yard?
The yard, yes it does.
Okay. So we can't require the county to shield it for you, can we?
No, I mean, we could, call Judge Strayer, I guess, and see how his appetite is for it.
I don't think it's in the budget.
Jason, you have any comments?
So no, I did list several conditions at the end of this. They're very similar to the conditions we had on the VFW. We'll go through the civil review, we'll talk drainage, all of that. We'll review screening at that point. This is one of those projects that doesn't really fall into the entry corridor design guidelines. So you do see some parking in the front of the building. If you look, there's a little row of parking up above that main building, just to the north of the entrance. But given the elevation change there on that area, we don't have any real concerns. So the only concern we may have is the elevation does start to taper off. So on your screen, it would be to your right along 16. There are several coaches that will be up pretty close. So if there's some additional screening you'd like to see there, vegetative, you can make that request on this. But the site is heavily treed. Again, this is not your typical commercial building where you're front loading it and putting all the parking and pedestrian activity. The only condition that I would leave off, that I did not make a note in this site plan, is that we would recommend approval of the plan with these conditions, except for the sign going over the entrance. Archway signs like that are not permitted by our sign code. So I wouldn't want to approve this site plan and then they go to Ray and say, hey, you all approved it during there. So we had the same issue. Hill and Vine had their arch up that morning. We saw them putting it up and we had to talk to them about taking that down. So we just want to make sure that we can add that the sign, any signs meet the city adopted sign codes.
So do we need to make that a condition that this does not include approval of signage?
Yes, ma'am, I would.
Yeah, we'll just say it follows the sign. That way I can just convey that.
Okay. So the condition is that they follow the sign.
Mentioned it, but how many spaces are there here?
145.
$45 million.
What do they expect occupancy to be most of the time?
Well, you typically have a husband-wife.
I mean, how many do they expect? Percentage occupancy. Percentage. 145. Do they anticipate that many at a time? Do they have rallies to get it full, or what do they do?
No, I don't know all the numbers, but I would expect, let's say, I would expect that, they would be full, more full in the winter than in the summer. But like I said, there's no other facility like this, and they just can't get in. And so I would expect, I guess if you're running the numbers, you'd probably only expect to have 50% occupancy or whatever for the bank and for your numbers and everything else. But knowing this town, I'd expect it to be full.
Market, you're looking probably 70-80%.
I wouldn't doubt it.
And this is not going to be something where these people are going to come in and out much, are they? Are they going to be here a while, generally speaking?
I would expect there to be traffic in and out. I wouldn't expect them to be just here for a weekend, or whether they're here for a week and they're moving on, or whether they're here for the entire summer.
Right.
These type of groups, spend a lot of time in them.
Sure.
So that does beg another question then. If you've got 145 spaces and knowing many of these very high-end luxury coaches will pull either a secondary vehicle behind them or in many cases a custom trailer that in size actually matches the size of the coach, are there provisions made for parking of those trailers?
Yeah, there's depth there. So you have depth there. You see the extra depth that's there for the trailer, and you have the side for the pullout. And in fact, you'll see, if you see on the site plan itself, you'll see you have the regular space and then the space next to it. Because they will unhook and they will drive around town. So you have the regular space.
Yeah, I believe there's one parking space for every pull-in. There's also some additional parking spaces up at the front and around the venue, so that is, I guess they want to drive through there. I can tell you from our experience at Lady Bird Park, our little RV park is full, and there's actually waiting lists to get on that, so I expect that this one will follow the same suit.
So one other quick question, it was brought up about screening along 16. My question is, are you trying to screen the coaches from 16, or are you trying to screen the noise from 16 off from the coaches if we're looking at adding screening?
Well, if you look
I would say that, you know, the plan is to minimize the grading on this, to keep all the trees that can be, and so the trees are supposed to provide the screening, but you're exactly right, that they want to screen the coaches from 16 just as much as you don't want to see the coaches from 16 when you're driving by.
This property's got quite a bit of topography to it, where those coaches are exposed at 16, it actually goes up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Or does it go
There's a
down?
pretty good ramp there.
Yeah, I mean, you can see if that existing house, this lodge is where that existing house is, if you've ever seen have you seen the existing house? I mean, that tells you,
It's up high.
it tells you the tree cover that's there, so.
If you have an art meeting, you see a lot of highway in here.
So,
Right. Put your feet on the ground.
Madam, you ready for a motion?
Sure.
I know Kevin's tired.
Don't forget.
I think you should let one of our either returning or new people make a motion. I'll let you roll. I mean, not to stop you, but we're on a roll.
Just go for it. This one got too many. You want a second?
I'll make the motion, you make the second.
Emily's got dibs on this one.
So I move that we approve SP 2111 as presented, subject to the staff recommendations of conditions 1 through 6 and adding recommendation number 7 that the sign ordinance be followed.
Second.
Good.
Have a motion by Polly and a second by Emily. Do I have any other discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, sir.
Thank you all very much.
Carried. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Kevin.
You didn't ask him when they were gonna break ground.
It doesn't matter.
I swear you've seen this project 3 times.
No, just twice. All right, let's do the minutes first, and then we'll have Jason. Item number 3, July minutes. Everybody had a chance to review them. Anybody?
I make a motion, we accept the minutes as presented. They're perfect.
Motion by Jim. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Daryl.
Chicken.
Any other discussion? Emily wasn't here. He wasn't here. Any other discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion carries. Guys, we're on TV.
Okay, so just a quick update on the short-term rental ordinance. We've been looking at our other cities. There's one more city ordinance that just got adopted within the last 2 weeks that we want to take a look at because it's one of the most recent ones. But right now, we are pushing on a timeline. And I'll be honest, it is very aggressive, but we're going to shoot for something to P&Z next month. We're going to work towards that. I don't know if we'll get there on that. We've gone through the code, not just looking at our current STR ordinance, but all of our development regs, parking, all of that. Basically, we've identified 27 separate sections of our code that need to be amended in order to accurately hit STRs. Our last code, there were some discrepancies, references to B&B compliance things that don't really apply. So there's a lot of work to be done on that. And they're not full rewrites of each section, just minor tweaks here and there, language. So we're moving forward with trying to get something to P&Z in September. There's also a discussion of maybe possibly having, because there's so many changes, we're changing the zoning ordinance. We have a new code enforcement. We're going to be, instead of sending them to court, we're going to enact a new ordinance that allows us to do it via the code officer and fines. We also have to amend the fire ordinance we'll address fire pits via setbacks, but the fire marshal's addressing some additional concerns versus those. And then there's one more ordinance the noise ordinance that we're going to address. So it's a lot of stuff to come at one time. So we're kind of recommending, hoping we can maybe do some kind of joint P&Z council workshop to where we can go over all of the proposed changes before we come to a vote, so everybody's aware. And then the other issue that we're kind of working timeline-wise, because there's so much, we may bring the zoning first and then come back with the sound and come back with the fire. But because they all work is one ordinance, we'd probably do some type of post date effective and make them all effective on the same date. So we don't have areas where our code is disjointed and, something happens and it gets delayed and now we're really out of whack. So we're shooting for September. That's a plan right now, whether that's full vote or some type of workshop. So we will let you know as soon as we get some direction from council and some availability. So we'll probably know something late next week. We'll reach out to you and let y'all know what.
Does this get trickled to the public before it comes to us?
I'm sorry?
Does this get presented to the public before it comes to us, either in a format, paper?
Well, if we don't do a workshop and we're going to go just straight to P&Z, I'm not a fan of that because that's pretty quick turnaround time. But we can put a draft on the technically y'all would be the public at the public hearing, but we would put that draft out there so people could see it as soon as possible. It's just, we have to have a legal notice to the newspaper, a week and a half, so we don't have a lot of time to work on it.
Wouldn't that just be prudent to do it that way? Can't we just delay this instead of making it September 1st, make it an October 1st?
Well, we're gonna shoot towards our deadline so that we make sure staff has got a little fire under us and we're working towards that, so.
I just think this is such a hot button that it needs to, the final draft needs to the public needs to have a cut at the final draft. That's just my thoughts.
No, and we'll definitely release that as soon as possible. But like I said, from a staff perspective, we have to just start tunneling through. I've already joked with Shelby, just wipe my calendar next week, because that's what I'll be living and breathing is code.
And most of those changes came out of that last meeting.
We got some great suggestions from the public.
4-hour meeting.
Short-term STR Alliance, what other cities are doing. We don't want to cannibalize too much from other communities because we are our own community. But what you saw tonight, the conversations, the concerns from the neighbors, hot tubs, pools, that's nothing new to staff. We see them daily. Y'all don't see them as much as we do, but I would say 90% of our phone calls, 75% of our DRC meetings, that's the market right now. So we see those issues. We try and address them where we can. We are limited by the code. So as we go through the code rewrite, we're going to make sure that, are we hitting community goals, vision goals, business goals? Are the codes syncing up within themselves and then syncing up with the other stuff? There's a lot going on, and we don't want to put out a code out there that's going to have a lot of unintended consequences. So,
Out of curiosity question, the R2s we dealt with Randy's project, there's not a true R2 in that whole group. It's all R1. It's all single-family residences, isn't it?
It is all single.
Being an R2.
It is all single-family residence. I can't say what the thought process was when that zoning district was initiated. You'll notice outside of that area on San Antonio, there's a lot of R2 up around the middle school. So my thoughts are 2006 timeframe in the planning world, and still today, when you're talking walkability, livability, apartment complex, people that live in there may not all have vehicles, and so you want those near the schools, you want those near the shopping districts, you want them where they work. So they may have been, those zoning districts may have been established more of a long-term vision, and they've never transferred over, and that's not unique. So again, from a staff perspective, we don't look at how that property is currently being used. We do, because we understand it, and that's why we made the recommendations to turn the buildings and screen the stuff, the spas, but ultimately we look at what it can be. So I think the first one was a good example. The neighbors had some concerns on that many STR units coming next to them, their residential use. I think we would all have the same type of concerns. I would, doing what I do, if I was that neighbor, I would say, well, at least it's not a bar, so.
Or not an apartment.
Or an apartment, or, there's a lot of uses in the CBD that may be more impactful than that short-term rental. So again, when we look at zoning, we kind of picture it as, these are clean slate properties. This is what that future use is. Now, when we go through the comp plan, that's something we're going to reevaluate. were our assumptions correct 15 years ago? Do we need to make some changes? Should these be R2 or should it be an extension of the CBD? If you look, what was interesting about this one, not so much the Austin one, but the San Antonio one, they needed a CUP because they're in the historic shopping district. And again, I mentioned that's because we want to reserve those areas for commercial uses, increase sale tax, all of that. There's no commercial zoning in that area, so it didn't really make a lot of sense to have a historic shopping district. Again, did that district come about anticipating that long-term these areas would transition to more of a neighborhood commercial, something like that would be a buffer between CBD and provide those citizens with personal services, daycares, workout area, spas, things of that nature, barbershops. So I think the comp plan, when we get through that process in the next 18 to 24 months, we'll see some changes to that area. So any proposed changes we make to the STR ordinance, they may get worked into the comp plan, but there may be even more changes that come out of that. So
Is there plans right now with the changes you guys working on to tighten up the parking situation?
Yes, that was one of the easy things that I think, there's basically two sides to this issue. There's a few people in the middle, but something we all agreed on was code enforcement and parking were big issues. And so now whether our parking recommendations are received 100% by the STR owners, I don't know that they will, and they may not be received 100% by the citizens. So, we're just going to try and find the best solutions we can. We think we have some numbers that go, STRs, they've been likened to hotels by citizens, and it was mentioned that they should have the same parking standard as hotels. I don't know that's really accurate. Short-term rentals tend to operate a little bit different than hotels as far as clientele go. Some of the smaller units that we see, that's generally geared towards couples and families. And so that's why you see our hotel is only 1.1. They also tend to have more vacancies. They're never at 100% except during, special events. Our short-term rentals generally in the city are at 100% every time. So we think that we do need to have a little bit more parking. So again, those are all things that we're kind of considering. It's funny, you write those codes and then you kind of see how it hits other section of codes, and you got to kind of tweak them back, especially when you're talking impervious cover. We're going to make some changes to some of our definitions. Right now, we say crushed granite gravel is pervious. The reality is, when you compact that and you put the stabilizer in, it's only about 25% if you're lucky. So, we're going to redefine and look at that, and that's something engineers been talking about doing for about a year now. So some of the changes you'll see are going to be directly driven by STR. Some of them are going to be housekeeping that go along with that. So I would hopefully eat dinner before that workshop if we have one, or the meeting, because we have a feeling it'll be a long
City
one.
Council provide us something to eat, just
Like I said, 25 sections of code that we'll be going through red lines, so
Yeah,
we'll bring coffee.
all right.
I move to adjourn.
I have a motion by Tim. Do I have a second? Emily?
Absolutely.
Second by Emily. All in favor, aye? Aye. All opposed? All right, let's adjourn. Thank you, everybody.
Thank y'all, commissioners. Good meeting tonight.
Yeah.